Welcome to the Period Besties podcast with Stasha and Katie. Think about it as chatting with your best friends about all the TMI stuff you've never talked about before with two period coaches who've been helping hormones collectively for over 20 years now. I'm Stasha.
And I'm Katie, and we're pulling back the curtain on what it's like in the world of menstrual coaching. From puberty to menopause and everything in between, we're here to show you how period coaching can save the day. We'll share practical tips and information you can put to immediate use to improve your hormones and happiness.
We're removing the mystery, ending the taboo, and shining a light on just how powerful period coaching can be.
So whether you need period coaching or are considering becoming a period coach yourself, these episodes are going to help you. We'll share stories, coach live on air, and bring smart, savvy guests to share their wisdom too. Let's start today's episode.
My cheeks hurt from smiling and laughing so much. It was so wonderful to see Holly, and I feel like we've heard snippets of her story, but it was really inspiring to listen to all the things that really fell into place, but because of her persistence.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we were having the menstruati dinners in Los Angeles and Holly was saying, okay, Ricki Lake and Abby Epstein are going to make a documentary from my book, and just being like so thrilled for her, and then sort of seeing it unfold, but in real time, which took many years. So being able to hear Holly in this episode give us like that concise, this is how it happened breakdown. And even I heard, some things that I don't remember her telling us as it was happening in real time necessarily. So I found that whole thing fascinating, super inspiring. If you're listening to this podcast and you have any interest in writing a book, getting some publishing, doing a documentary, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned and listen to everything Holly has to say, because it was really inspiring and I found very fascinating.
Oh, same. I just love her persistence and like taking the bus to Brentwood, walking up the hill. I can't get over this. And ringing Ricki Lake's doorbell.
Yeah, not even the doorbell, the like little bell that you're supposed to hit in your car to drive up, but she wasn't driving. She'd taken the bus, so she was hitting the like driving intercom to get it. I loved it.
And then still had to walk up. Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. You'll have to listen to the podcast to hear the whole story, because it's at Hollywood, LA, it only happens here type of situation. It's awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. And her rapid fire round at the very end answers where I was just giggling. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this interview with Holly that we have for you today. I think you're going to find it very inspiring, and check out her book, Sweetening the Pill. We'll talk about it on the podcast, but just a quick shout out. It's on Amazon. So if you haven't read it yet, go grab a copy. And yeah, here's our podcast with Holly.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special episode of Period Besties with our dear friend and amazing author, Holly Grigg-Spall, who wrote the book Sweetening the Pill, which the documentary that Ricki Lake and Abby Epstein produced in, my goodness, was that 2021?
Yeah, it premiered in 2021. In November, I think.
Okay. I was trying to do the math backwards. Thank you again. The business of birth control. So we are so excited and honored that you're joining us today and having a discussion about what brought you into this work and how this work has really impacted and changed your life. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. So generally we kick off with the who are you, what do you do question. So do you want to give us just a little bit of background?
Sure, absolutely. So the book came out about, just over 10 years ago now. So I don't do that anymore, essentially, because it's over. But it's been definitely shaped my life from that point onwards. As you mentioned, the documentary that it was inspired by the book came out late 2021. And so I've been a producer and consultant on that since about 2014, I think is when we began making that movie. So a long time ago. And now I do a bunch of different things. I basically went from journalism into marketing specifically for female health companies about 8 years ago, I think, maybe 7 years ago. And so I've worked with a lot of different people and companies and brands over that time. And then my most recent project has been working on Teena, which is a body literacy app for tweens and teens to learn about puberty and periods and track their periods. So yeah, that brings us up to today. I also still do podcasts about the book and the movie, obviously. So that's me.
Well, I'm curious because you've been in this field for a long time, right? So what was going on with your own health, your own period that kind of inspired you to walk this path?
Yeah, so we're going back now to like 2007, 8, basically. And so we're back to a time where there wasn't really a bunch of social media. There wasn't a bunch of period coaches. There wasn't a bunch of, health coaches for women online. There wasn't, the kind of community that we have now. Basically, you just had forums. So it was just like you'd go onto a website and they'd have a forum. People leave messages, people go in and reply. Obviously, those are still around, but it's not the key way that we communicate with each other online really anymore. So back then, I had been taking the pill for about 8 years or so, and from my teens into my mid-20s, that is. And I started taking a pill that was very popular at the time. I was in England, but it was popular in the US as well. And it was a newer pill with a newer progestin. And I experienced quite severe side effects from that pill. And the way I made the connection and figured that out was Googling and finding forums online. And there was a specific one called the Yaz Survivors Forum, which was for people who had physical issues like gallbladder issues, strokes, blood clots, various things, but also mental health issues like depression and anxiety and things like that. And that's how I made the connection after about 2 years of taking it, between the pill I was taking and what I was experiencing. And at the time, as I say, I was a journalist, but I was a film journalist. So I was writing movie reviews and interviewing actors and directors. And my husband encouraged me to write about it and pitch it to some magazines, as well as, what I was doing with my day job. And I wrote a pitch for a magazine called Easy Living magazine, which doesn't exist anymore. Like the vast majority of magazines don't exist anymore. And also what doesn't exist anymore is an editor getting a pitch and taking you out for lunch and being like, oh, this is really great. This is how we should do it. So never happens anymore. I left the media world just as it crumbled and became something that's really not fun and glamorous and interesting. It's so interesting now. So she did that, and she was really lovely and very encouraging. I thought there was a lot there to explore. And so I ended up writing a piece called something like the pill side effects that you don't know about, or that doctors don't tell you about. And I interviewed a lot of people for that. And of course, those interviews were really insightful and interesting, and kind of led me to realize, oh, it's not just this pill that's the problem, that the one that you're talking about, they all have these different effects. And it's a gendered issue, and that you should see it in a much larger scale way. And so that really interested me. And then I had a lot of big life changes. The recession hit. I left my company that I worked for, folded. We took the opportunity to leave the UK and move to the US. I got married and I was sitting around waiting for my work visa. And in sitting around waiting for my work visa, I was trying to keep myself busy. And so I started a blog, which is what you did in those days, Blogspot. It's still online, I think, although I don't know, maybe I've taken it offline. I can't remember. But I started doing that, and I wrote a lot, several times a week. And after about 3 or 4 weeks of doing that, I was like, oh, what would be really interesting would be to come off the pill completely after 10 years at that point. And not for the aim of getting pregnant, but just to come off it and see how I felt. And so I did that, and I decided to document it in a blog. And the blog ended up being something that got, a decent amount of comments and interaction after a while, and lots of people sharing their stories. And of course, that led me to talking to people in my own life about their experiences. And then from that point on, I ended up developing the book proposal from what was the content of the blog at the time. But the blog got quite a lot of media interest as well, and that was really helpful. There was a really great editor at the Independent newspaper in the UK. The Times was really interested in it. Ruby Warrington was the editor at the time, and she ended up coming up with Sober Curious, and she just did a book about women without kids, and she's always a bit of a leader in different things. So yeah, that's how I got the confidence basically to think, oh, well, this might actually be something that could be a book or something more than that even. So yeah.
That's quite the journey. It's fascinating. And I know more and more people are coming off of birth control now, not to get pregnant, but just to see what kind of human being they are off of the pill, because they don't feel like they're the old selves anymore. So I know more and more people are doing that journey now, and probably in a large part thanks to the publicity that you've drummed up over the years on the conversation, and going, oh wait, the pill might actually be why I'm depressed or anxious or having these digestive issues or a huge host of things. But people are starting to go, I kind of would like to see what I'm like off the pill now.
Yeah, and of course, like back then, there were people who taught fertility awareness, and there were people who were menstrual health advocates, and or academics who were writing about menstruation. And I interviewed a lot of them for the book, but you once, in the last 10 years, you've seen this proliferation of content on social media, and kind of almost like the mainstreaming of these ideas about, well, does the pill affect my personality and depression and anxiety, and what is it doing? And of course, a lot of books that have been more like looking into different sides of it, or looking into like the health aspect in terms of like how to transition off the pill and things like that. So a lot more has come about in that time. But back when I was doing this, like I was writing for women's magazines or women's websites, and I would get a lot of backlash. Like people were not open to it back then at all, really. It was more like people felt very uncomfortable talking about it, and so that's changed, I feel, to an extent. I think it's not, I just in the New York Times, they had an article about the impact of the pill on libido, which was very balanced and good and fair, and talked about women's experiences and didn't try and dismiss it. This was just last week. So, we've got to the point where it's seen as like valid conversation, like that there should be weight given to it, and that it's something people want to hear about, read about, rather than like a niche topic. And also to the point where I think people really understand it as like a feminist and a women's issue, and that it's something that we experience collectively, rather than sort of individually worrying over our symptoms. So yeah, a lot of things have shifted, but I still do now come up against some people who would put it in like a bucket of like medical misinformation, essentially, and see it as part of like what they feel is the kind of goopy, anti-vax kind of wellnessy world that they are suspicious of in general, and think is leading people astray. So that's been more of a shift, I think, since like 2020, really. But yeah, it's a mixed bag still, I think, but there's largely positive changes over that time.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. So on the flip side of the coin, I guess, with the controversy, what has come out as being like one of your favorite things about working in this field?
I think it's interesting because when I was writing the book, like I said, I obviously connected to people that I interviewed and had great conversations with them, mostly over the phone. I was in Central Oregon at the time, and when I did end up working, I was working at Target as a on the checkout, so I didn't have a ton of money to go and see people. So for me, after the book came out, it was like I met so many more people, and it took on a life of its own in the people that it found for me. So I made a lot of friends, and I found a bigger community. And that community's only grown over time. And, sometimes you go on Instagram and places and you realize that the people, I used to feel like I knew a lot of people in this community. And now I feel like I know maybe like a tenth of the people who are like doing this stuff, which is really interesting. So yeah, I think for me, it's like once you write a book, people sometimes think, oh, it's job done. But it really isn't. You end up marketing and selling and promoting and talking about your book for much, much longer after that. And it just becomes part of your life. So you don't really move on from it at any point. Unless you write, something completely different. And then you still end up comparing it to the original of what you wrote anyway. So yeah, for me, it was really just finding like friends and community and meeting a lot of new people through that from a point where I felt kind of like definitely a loner in being publicly discussing this. Like, I was interviewing people, they were working with women privately, or they had their own thoughts in their own communities and they've made changes there. Or, maybe they just wrote about it academically as a topic from a distance. So I felt quite alone. And then obviously, when the book came out, it got picked up for the documentary. So that snowballed in itself. Like I immediately had people that believed in that concept of it, believed that it could be a documentary. And then through that, and then through other work, I've just met a lot of people since, which has really been, the upside of it all. And I think most people say that about writing nonfiction books, is you just kind of don't realize how much more there is out there until it comes out and people find it who find the topic interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I'm super curious about the book turning into a documentary. Did Ricki Lake and Abby find you? Like, walk us through this amazing process, because it's obviously took a long time from like when you met to when it actually came out, the documentary. So how did they find you? How did you find them?
Well, everything I've done has always been about like just being persistent, basically. Like with my book getting published, I had to, I see people going, oh my God, I've had 10 rejections. I've probably had 100. I didn't even know how many. I don't have so many emails I wasn't tracking. When I wrote to agents, and I had some really nice positive, every 50 people, there would be one person who'd be like, get me on the phone and be like, this is really great, but I can't help you. But they would still say this was really great, which made the difference, right? Like I remember there was a really nice agent in New York with a big agency there, a literary agency, who got me on the phone. He was like, this is so good. But like, it's not for me. I don't know what I would do with it, but you should do something with it because it's really good. And like, you just needed every so often somebody to say that. But also most of the time it was like, no, you're not a doctor. Do you want to co-write with a doctor? Should we get a doctor to read it? Like, I don't know what this is. This isn't really a memoir. This isn't really and I was a movie film journalist, so I wasn't a health writer. I hadn't got that background. And so, so it's just been persistence basically, and not being just saturating the situation. So even when I sent it out for reviews, sent out so many emails. I did a lot of my own marketing. So it's a very small publisher. I sent out so many emails, and then just the fact that some people read the book and then gave it a horrible review was like, oh, that's nice. I'm glad they read the book and reviewed it, because most people's expectation is that nobody will read it and nobody will review it, and that's really like the worst outcome, right? The worst outcome isn't people reviewing it and tearing it apart online. It's that nobody would read it. So then with the movie it was the same. So I think it was about 6 months before it got published for real, like that you could actually buy it. I was working with through Craigslist. I think it seems bizarre, but I think it's true. I found this person who was doing a documentary, wanted to make a documentary about birth control, and she was looking for people to work with her on it here in LA. And so we got together like a group of 4 other women, and there was a woman who was like she's actually very successful editor now. So that was her main thing, was editing documentary and non-fiction TV projects. And somebody else, and then this person whose idea it was, and we were working on it, but we were working on it super slowly. So we did about 4 shoots in LA with different people, Lara Catone, Hank Quitzani, and Digimama. We did a few shoots, but none of us had any time. None of us had any money. It was really a lot of legwork, a lot of effort. But we were trying to make it work. We did a birth control party in Echo Park here, where we invited a bunch of people. We did a comedy show. We had a comedy show. We had food, and we did like mini interviews with people about their birth control experiences. But we got to the point where it was just not working. Like, nobody had the momentum that we needed to get it going, but we all felt like it was super important. So things kind of fell apart. But I was still in touch with the woman who went on to be an editor, and she was going to direct, and she could do camera work and stuff. Anyway, so we were kind of plodding along with it a little bit, and then I thought, well, I watched this Business of Being Born, which had been suggested to me around the same time to watch. Like, oh, this might be something that you could watch, and maybe that would inspire like a documentary format for you. So I'd watched it, and I looked up Abby Epstein, and I just emailed her production company, and I said, I have this book. I probably still have the email. I never delete emails. So I have this book. I think you might be interested in it. I think it could be your next big project after the Business of Being Born. These are the similarities between the 2 topics, and the way that you approach them and the way I'm approaching them with the book. So she said, well, yeah, send me the galley. Now, I have a very small publishing company based out of the UK. So I just went down to Staples and printed it and bound it myself and sent it to her. And she said, yes, I've got it. And then I waited, a significant amount of time, knowing how long it can take people to get around to doing that sort of thing. And she said, look, this is too big for me to like carry around in my bag, so I'm just not reading it. And I think I then sent her a digital version, and then waited some time again. She hadn't been reading it, hadn't been happening. She was getting back to me, but I was just checking in. And then eventually I had the actual book in my hands, and I sent that to her in the mail before it came out. And then she took it without me knowing. She eventually took it on a plane with her to fly to LA to stay with Ricky Lake, and just, I think, for a vacation. And so she got in on a Thursday, I think it was, and she called me, and she finished reading it, and she got there in the evening and talked to Ricky Lake about it. And she said that she really loved the book. And she said, well, where are you at with your making this documentary at the moment? Because I had kind of thought that maybe they'd come on as like executive producer or something. I wasn't, because we were still sort of trying to put it together at that point. And I told her it had kind of fallen apart, but we had some footage. And so then she was like, well, I talked to Ricky about it, and she really likes the idea. I read it on the plane. I'm really interested in this. Will you come to Ricky's house tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. or something and just talk to us about it? And I called my friend who I was working with, and I said, well, do you want to come and do this? And we can show them the footage. And she was like, yeah, I just can't do that. Could we do like next month or something. And I was like, I have a feeling that this is probably a moment where you just say yes and just do it, because I don't think these things come around. As I said, she's gone on to do very well for herself. So I said, look, I'll go and I'll just pitch, and we'll see what comes of it. I have no idea what's going to come of it. So I was working in West LA at the time, which I'm in over on the other side of town. So it was a long way. And I got the bus all the way to Brentwood. And I got off and I walked up the hill to Ricky Lake's house in Brentwood at the time. And I buzzed on her buzzer, which you're really just meant to do from your car. And then I went to her house and I sat at her kitchen island and I pitched literally for like 2 hours. Like they were like, that's kind of what I walked into. It was very much like, sit down, here's a cup of coffee, here's something to eat. And Abby was like, tell her what you're doing. And then I had to just like explain the whole thing. I always remember at one point Abby was like, oh, you must be really fun at parties. And I was like, yeah, no, not right now. I'm not that fun. And then her yoga instructor came in and she joined the group and we were talking about that. And her husband at the time, and it became this big thing. And then eventually, like, I had to go to work. So I left and they were like, okay, so, we'll be in touch. But they were obviously really interested and they said, like, this could be something. And I walked down the hill to where I worked because I worked in West LA. And Ricky Lake friended me on Facebook. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, like, within, I think, 2 months or so, they optioned the book to make the film. And basically given me a contract for that for, like, a couple of years, I think it was. And then by, like, maybe even the end of January 2014, so the book came out September 2013, I was doing a shoot with them at the farmers market in Santa Monica, and they were filming what you can see in the film now, which are some of the women that they take off the street and ask about their experiences. And we did that in the farmers market at that point. So then 7 years later, and that was like, I attended multiple shoots, New Orleans, San Diego, New York, and I was in touch with them the whole time because all the people they were interviewing and stuff, this was a totally new topic to them. And obviously over 7 years, things changed a lot and people brought out books and people became kind of famous for talking about this stuff and were doing like TV spots and much bigger platforms than I had. And so, yeah, then eventually it got to the point that it was done, but that was 2020. And so we were like, oh, we're going to launch it in 2020. And then that didn't happen because there weren't any film festivals and nobody was going to see movies. And so they did a premiere at the New York Film Festival on November 2021. And then it got going after that. But yeah.
What a journey. My goodness. I think my favorite part was like you walking up the hill in Brentwood and ringing Ricky Lake's doorbell.
And not in my car because I don't drive.
Yes.
So inspiring though. I mean, it really it's so inspiring because it's like a normal person can get things done with persistence. Like that's kind of my takeaway from it. It's very inspiring in that way where, a lot of the times, especially with like writing a book or producing a movie or any of these things, you think like you need to have a rich parent or a connected family or know a guy. And the reality was it was just sheer persistence. And I love that. I love that.
I like that you say that because I do have a family connection in publishing back in the UK. She writes mostly non-fiction, historical books. She does well in the UK. And I wrote her at the time, like thinking, oh, this is a good like opportunity to like we used to spend every Christmas with her and family. Like, she's one of my mum's best friends, basically. And she was like, this isn't a book. This might not even be an article. You're never going to get anywhere with this.
Wow.
Well done.
So yes, no, I didn't lean on anybody because everybody told me I was an idiot and that I shouldn't be doing it, and that it was never going to be a book proposal, and it was never going to be picked up, and that maybe at best it would be an article, but there wasn't enough there for it to be anything else. And then in terms of like industry, like we just living in LA was sufficient that I could get a bus to Brentwood, right, for the next morning and do that. Like, it is at its best that kind of place where you do find opportunity, and that obviously that would have been a very different story perhaps if I was still in Oregon, or if I was in the UK. I don't know. But I was here, so it was doable, and that allowed me that situation to happen, I think, as well as like meeting people prior to that who were interested in making films and serious about it and had equipment and stuff like that. That's kind of a LA thing in a way, but yeah, no. Otherwise, I had no secret in to Ricki Lake's agent or anything. I was just like, there must be an email address. I'll just email her.
Yeah, but just believing in yourself and believing in how your experience, right? And not letting anyone tell you like this is not going to be something, because
or just to not try, or to feel so rejected by the first email you get back, which is usually the I don't know, maybe we could send it to me kind of email. A lot of people, I think, immediately feel like they have to be like welcomed with open arms, but like people are busy and you're not the forefront of their mind. One of the first when I was living in London, I worked at a lot of different places, but I for a while was temping at Condé Nast in the offices in London, and that just meant you were like put in to fill in for people. So usually you were on reception, or you were doing assistant stuff, or like you were doing database stuff, or you were doing admin. And I've been doing it for a while, and I was sat up in the offices for, I think it was the Homes magazine that they had at the time, which is like luxury homes kind of magazine. And I went on the email and I saw you could email the whole building if you wanted to. And so I just emailed the whole building. This is when I was probably like 24. I just emailed the whole building and was like, I'm kind of bored. I don't know if I've got anything to do up here. I'm on my own. Does anybody have any work that I can do for them? I, basically just was like, I'm happy to do work for the entirety of Condé Nast. And everybody got it, including the editor of Vogue magazine at the time, who called me up on the phone in the Condé Nast office and was like, that was a really ballsy thing to do. I was like, was it? I thought I was being helpful. And she was like, yeah, that was kind of the thing to do. I was like, okay, do you want to come down and work with us? And then she gave me the very coveted Vogue internship for 3 months, which was all the things you would expect it to be, good and bad. So all the interesting things that happened in my life have happened because I've just been like, just email them.
Hey, why not? I love it.
I mean, that's my takeaway. I'm going to just do some emailing after this interview.
Why not try? If they don't get back to you, oh well, never mind.
Fair enough. Okay, so with all of this craziness and clearly sheer stubborn persistence, what did you do to take care of yourself? Like, do you currently have a self-care or like daily non-negotiables or anything that you use to just kind of keep the spirits up, keep you going, moving forward, feeling good, feeling strong?
Well, when the book came out and I was sending out and doing a lot of the marketing myself and it was getting bad reviews, I was just drinking a lot of alcohol, I think. I was sending it to people that I really admired in some cases. And sometimes it was like, I remember that it was like a magazine that I had written for. and they'd been really nice, and I'd met the editor, and they gave me the most like dismissive, horrible review, basically like insinuating that I had pre-existing mental health issues and I was lying and nothing had ever changed. That's just what I was like, and that it wasn't a side effect, it was me. I just remember going and buying a bottle of red wine and being like, this is really depressing. I can take it from people I don't care about, but I can't take it from people who I thought we were friends. But no, that's not my go-to anymore. But then you have to remember I was 29, I think, 28, 29 at the time. And so, yeah, I think I got off social media in 2020, which I think was what I needed to do. It's changed a lot in ways that were just not helpful or to me. And so I don't do that for myself personally anymore. I do it for work, but not my work, but other people's work. So I don't get involved. And that I think was really helpful timing for me to do that. After spending a lot of time in the wellness community, and then the changes that we saw happen in 2020 in terms of the way people were online was really kind of disturbing to me. So I was glad to get out of that, and I haven't gone back. I can't say I would recommend it in terms of like growing your brand or things, because I don't sell as many books now as I used to. And I think a big part of that is because I'm not on social media. But it definitely is helpful for me. And I think that was one thing that I did do. I think you get used, the big thing for me was to find a community and a group of people and not just put myself out on my own so much. And that has obviously come naturally from the documentary and other things that I've done and meeting people like you guys. And that's made a big difference. But now I don't really, the stress isn't as present to me anymore. I think over the past few years, I've definitely still had, people will write articles and be like, they'll mention my work or they'll say something about me that's, the last few years, it's been very much like dumping me in with like assuming I have a lot of other beliefs and thoughts and feelings about things around the pandemic that I don't have, and connecting those up to make a story. And that's always a little bit like jarring. But the nice thing is once you're off social media, they have no fresh content to use. So they're really just going off like your bio on your website. So it's always pretty dry and limited because they don't really have anything they're able to dig up. And nobody ever wants to talk to you, right? They never go, maybe I should ask this person if this is actually correct, seeing as I'm writing for Rolling Stone magazine. No, they don't bother to do that. They're just like, you're lucky if you get an email 2 hours before the article goes live going, do you have a comment you have to answer in the next 45 minutes? And that's basically it. And I don't generally answer. So, yeah, I mean, that's a big part of like moving away from it. But there's so many other people doing this work now that you immediately feel like protected because you can point to other people's books and other people's research and other people's online output. You don't have to just be like standing there going, this happened to me and I think it happens to a lot of people, and here are some interviews I did. It's very different now.
Yeah.
On that same conversation, one of the things you mentioned was community. What inspired you to start the menstruati dinners in Los Angeles?
Well, because in LA, I think what happened was, initially I remember what happened was Lara Bryden came to LA and we decided to set up an event and ended up adding Nicole Jardim in, and the event was at the then Loom space, which is very sadly closed, and Erica Chidi interviewed us. And then the next day we thought we'd do a more like informal meet and greet kind of thing with people who wanted to talk to Lara and Nicole because they're not from here. And then there were a bunch of people there, and then that was so fun, and I connected with a bunch of people. And so I was like, oh, well, this is cool. And also the way LA is, like, you can go such a long time between seeing people. You can know them for years, but only have seen them like 5 times. And because it's so spread out, I think, and the traffic and the driving and the West Side, East Side divide, that I thought, well, it'd be really nice to do something which is regularly happening. And if you can come, you can come. If you can't, you can't. But it's happening, ongoing. And that was the way I thought to like meet people in LA that were interested in the same things, and also that you could kind of cut through a lot of the initial kind of conversations you have with people who aren't in this world, where they're like, how, like, where it's all a little bit awkward, at least for a couple of minutes, where they're worried about what kind of person you are based off that. And so, yeah, that was really what inspired it. Is I was like, well, I feel like, and I've done it since with other groups as well. It's like the regularity of it and the kind of participation level of like, this is the time, this is where it's going to be, like, be there or don't be there. We're still going to do it, basically. And that's kind of the best, I found, a very good approach for social life in LA, because otherwise, every time I do something like that, I'm surprised anybody turns up, because my assumption is nobody's going to turn up ever, because that happens a lot.
Yes. Well, we all did. And I feel like it was such a great community. And it was nice to, Stosh and I talk about this all the time about like, oh, when we first met, wait, you're doing something similar? Oh, okay. Let's talk about this. Like, the more that we talk about it, the more that we bring awareness to it. But also, like, you have somebody to share, like, here's what's going on with my client. Like, I've tried all these things and it's working, but what do you think is missing? Like, what can we kind of add into that? And I think such a amazing community of like-minded people is really great to meet and hang out with, and like have dinner and enjoy our company with each other too.
Yeah, and I think it was really helpful as well in that we had conversations about, like, business stuff as well, and plans for what we wanted to do. But the awareness of it being like, I really want to do this because this is really important, but I still need to make money, or I still need to like live, but it's really important and I can't do it for free. But I do a ton for free kind of conversations, which is like a different thing when you're doing this sort of thing that you guys are doing, where it's like you feel really passionate about it and a lot of people need help, but you also need to survive and make it into something sustainable for yourselves. And so I felt like we had a lot of good conversations around that, and also just people coming from really different approaches too, like different areas of expertise, and also just what they were doing. Was it writing? Was it movies? Was it speaking? Was it coaching, which was really good too. But yeah, as is always the way, everybody leaves LA. Leaves me.
I know.
That's true.
It's a transient city. It's not, nobody wants to be here permanently for some reason.
I never thought I was going to leave, to be honest. And then all of a sudden we were like, it's time to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the podcast, right? Like, let's have that period besties conversations. Let's bring our favorite people in and let's have those conversations in a way that other people can feel like they're sitting at the table with us, having, have a snack, have a meal, hang out with your, period besties, have a chat. Maybe we should name the podcast The Menstruaties.
We could do. Yeah.
No, I've already done the branding. It's too late.
No, it's too late.
It took us a while to get there.
I haven't seen it turn up any other places, actually, really. But yeah, no, the consistency was really good. It was nice to see people regularly. And you miss that even more now. I think over the pandemic, a lot of us like just went disparate ways and you just weren't seeing people as frequently. A lot of people just get lost in the mix because you just fall out of communication. But yeah, so it was a nice thing to do, I think. It worked well.
Yeah. I was always grateful that you brought everyone together.
Yeah, just getting everybody to agree on a day is enough, isn't it? If you can do
I'm
that,
also grateful that
you can do anything, basically.
Yeah. Just to pivot a little bit, I want to hear about what you're working on now, because you and I emailed and I've introduced you to a few of my friends that have teenage girls, and I absolutely love what you're doing and having these conversations, because this is something that I never had as a teenager. I remember getting my period and my mom having a 2-minute conversation with me, and then it was like, there you go, good luck.
Yeah.
And my friends' daughters are like coming to me to talk to me about their periods. And I want to hear about Teena, because I am so excited about bringing this to younger women.
Yeah. So I came into it to kind of help more so with the app. So Teena is a free app, and it comes with a device that you can use to track your cycle and your periods. And that was developed separately. And I worked mainly on the app, which we wanted to be like a free portal for education for tweens and teens that was, giving them information that was coming from a menstrual health and body literacy place. So basically taking what we're doing, so many great people are doing for adults, including you both, for adult women, and taking it for tweens and teens and having them have that same information and the same perspective on the cycle. Because I was looking around, and aside from like a couple of books, most of the information out there was really geared around like, oh, now you have a period and you can have a baby. And that's what it's about. And it wasn't about health. It wasn't about the fifth vital sign. It wasn't about wellness. It wasn't about cycle syncing or energy changes or anything like that. It was very much like you get your period and then you can have a baby someday. And I thought, oh, it's kind of not only like doing a disservice to those age groups and what their experience is going to be in the future for their whole lives, but also just seemed very alienating if you're 8 and going through puberty, or you're 9 or 10 and being told that. It seems like, is that really the best way to present and couch this information for them to have like a good relationship with their period, but also just a good relationship with their bodies over time, is for it to be like that be your in? It seemed kind of strange and weird to me. And so I really thought, well, why can't we take the kind of way we look at the cycle for women, where you're not saying that, right? You're saying there's ovulation and hormone changes and phases and shifts and events of the cycle that impact your quality of life and wellness now and ongoing long term, and that it's all part of the experience of who you are and how you relate to the world and things like that. And I thought, well, that seems to me much more appealing to as a kid, to like learn about it from a positive place that is also science-based and health and wellness oriented, and like also self-care oriented. So I was looking at kind of like the Gen Z way of being super transparent about periods, which they are. They're way more willing to talk about it and to ask their schools to stock free period products, and to not be ashamed around other people to talk about it. But they weren't so much getting the health aspect of it, and a lot of what they were saying was still leaning negative. So I wanted to bring that to an app for tweens and teens. So, it's an app that's talking about ovulation, but not as sex ed. It's talking about the periods, but not just as the sign you can get pregnant. It's talking about it from a health and wellness perspective, but in like a big sister tone, like a kid-friendly way with illustrations and images and cartoons and animations and stuff that kind of condenses it and makes it relevant to their lives, and the mood changes and the puberty changes and things they're going through, and also relevant to their parents to understand. But that isn't sex ed, that isn't going down that road. So, if you want your kid to log in and read the information at 7 or 8, that's fine. You can decide when you're ready to bring in that another layer of information for them. And that's how it developed. And then the other side of it for me was very much wanting to be positive. So it was to have a language that didn't, because I think even the best apps out there for period tracking, still when you're tracking symptoms or signs or changes, a lot of the wording is mostly negative. There's not a lot of positive wording around it. There's not a lot of highlighting the good things that you might feel, think, or might happen. So I really wanted to bring that in as well. So we're doing really well on the downloads for the app. And then the device is an additional basal body temperature device. It's like a simplified design for tweens and teens to have. And obviously the benefit I could see for that was that a big major issue with young kids about getting their period is when it's a surprise or a shock, or it happens when they're not expecting it, or they're dealing with however much they might feel okay about it, they're then ending up having to be forced to deal with how other people around them might end up responding to them getting their period. So tracking and knowing more accurately than period or whatever that's only taking period dates seems like a really added value beneficial thing that some teens might be really interested in. And so the app can help them do that so that they know when they're in their follicular phase or their luteal phase, and they can get cycle synced tips and advice for those phases as well. So it kind of brings them into the idea of the cycle as a whole, but also is giving them more accurate predictions on their next period. And that seems to be something that people for their kids, because it helps them avoid the stress and anxiety of not knowing when their usually quite irregular periods are going to arrive.
And what a beautiful way to, at a younger age, to really connect to your body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited to see this generation and how body image is different, their connection to their period, their menstrual cycle, all of it is so just ingrained in who they are and their experiences. It's going to be really interesting to watch, because my friend that was here visiting with her 13-year-old, we were just out and having lunch and she was just talking about her period. I was like, wow, this ask me any question you want. I will talk about periods all day. But I feel like when I was 13 years old, I don't think I would have been comfortable doing that at all. No. And my mom wouldn't have been comfortable. So I love what you're doing, because I think it's so important to feel empowered in your body at such a young age.
Yeah. And I mean, we know what happens in terms of self-esteem and confidence and mental health for young people when they get their periods. And part of that is the response to them getting their periods, and part of that is how they feel about getting periods, and obviously how they're taught to feel about it by mom or their sister or whoever. And that has a big negative impact over time. And then you think of the knock-on effect of their decision making about their cycle and periods over their lifetime. To have the initial experience be more planned and prepared, but just also more positive, and for them to understand why it's happening, but in a way that isn't scary or out, just not something that they connect with. Hope is what we think to be quite life-changing for them, and it should be something that's that they can talk about. But like you said, a lot of moms even now don't quite remember what they were taught, or what they taught was not correct, or they're uncomfortable talking about it, or their experience with their period was so unpleasant that they can't imagine having a positive experience with periods. So there's also that, because obviously the main person is not a parent or maybe a teacher, who is sort of giving that information. And so we're finding that, like, it's also an app where you can go in and read what you need to read, and you don't have to admit what perhaps you didn't know, or feel ashamed of what you didn't know, or weren't sure about, or had forgotten. So that's being a helpful side of it as well.
It's certainly a trend. I mean, period coaching school every single year has a minimum of one person whose goal is to educate younger first periods, menarche, whether it's just their own community or like we have two sisters who are Native American and live on a reservation, and they're in school right now because they want to educate their whole, like the reservation, all of the kids, everybody. And we've had people previously who wrote a book for, that first period. And another girl in a different year wanted to do menarche, like celebrations, like the first period parties, essentially. So, I mean, I see that in the school because I get to see different people year round and what their goals are. Mm-hmm. What do they want to do? Like, how do they want to impact the world of menstrual stuff, the menstrual movement, that kind of thing? And every year, without a break, we've had a minimum of one person, if not multiple people, whose sole goal is menarche, teens, something in that genre. So I've started saying, well, download Teena. Get familiar with the app, because this is probably what you're going to be suggesting to the girls that you're working with, or the moms. Mm-hmm. Or the families, like, bring the boys along, get them involved. Like, everyone should know. So start getting familiar with this. And in the summit that I did in 2023, I had a mother-daughter duo who wrote and illustrated a children's book on periods. And it was just such a, like, lovely goal that they had. Like, they just exactly the same. They wanted to change that initial impact so that they had a completely different life, as your period affects everything. And as those feelings and judgments on your period affect everything, and your self-esteem and all that stuff. And they wanted to, make that impact right at the beginning so that they had a completely different, much more positive life than they themselves did. And they themselves, had moving forward. So it's just been so inspiring to see that. And I love the idea of having this resource that parents can use to help educate themselves as well. And then moving forward with their kids, it's just, I think it's going to make a huge difference. And like you said, they're having those conversations, right? Like my friends with teens and younger are calling me as well, asking those questions. And it's, well, go talk to Auntie Stash and, we'll set up a call and like do a private coaching session with my, 9-year-old kid or whatever. But it's fun. And I love talking to the teens and having those conversations. And sometimes it is not having mom in the room as well that actually makes it an easier conversation with them. So sometimes I get the like, hey, I need you to talk to my kid and I need to not be there so that you can have a conversation where they're not censoring themselves. And it's like, okay, great.
Yeah, I know. And I remember the reason, when I was doing interviews around my book and the movie and stuff, like a lot of people were like, oh, so what needs to change then? Like what do you see? Like the final question would always be, or what do you see for the future of this? And like, obviously, I think all of us pretty much would say like teaching body literacy in schools, right? Like, because it's all well and good to be undoing stuff when you're 25 or 30 or discovering this, or when you want to get pregnant. But that's really the key, is to do it then, because you need to change how these kids feel about their bodies, and in multiple ways. And connecting them to that at puberty is like maybe what would help them down the line in many ways. So yeah, I mean, I think I agree that it seems to be more and more people doing it, offering like independent classes in schools, and offering online workshops, and offering courses and things for parents who want to like connect more with their child over this. But yeah, also just having them, you know, as you said, sometimes they don't want to do it with their parent. It's easier just for them to. I run the TikTok for Teena, and it's all kids that are probably shouldn't be on TikTok age, who are not old enough, but are commenting, and they're like, oh, asking questions, and they'll go on, they go, I got my period today, and like, you know, like it's really fun and interesting to see how they talk about it and how they're nervous, but a lot of them don't want to talk to their mother or their father about it at all. And that's like, oh yeah, see, they don't even have that person to go to at all. So, you know, TikTok's fine, and there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of people telling them to eat oranges to get their period and stuff. But you try and be like a good source of positive information. And then the app is obviously self-contained. So like, you know, like your kid can go into that and it's a safe place for them to learn without being led down any rabbit holes that you don't want them to go down. Which, you know, that's part of learning on social media. There are good sides and bad sides to it. But yeah, there's a lot of kids on the TikTok who would like don't want to talk to their mom, or don't get information at school, or are still getting like teachers saying ridiculous things at school, and like, you know, they're still nervous about swimming or going on vacation or various things. So yeah, things have changed, but then they also haven't changed at all.
Yeah. I think something we should say for our listeners, if you're interested in the Teena app or following them on TikTok, it's spelled Teena. So if you want to go to get that at the App Store or head over to TikTok to check out the account, Teen.
Yes, exactly. Not Tina.
Yeah, there's just so many different ways you can spell things these days that I felt like we should probably spell it out for the podcast.
No, that's good. That's a good idea.
Put it in the show notes as well, but just, you know, driving down the road and you're not going to go look at the text, just so you can go check it out. I love it. Is there any, while I'm on the topic, is there any other places people should go to check out you? Where can they find your book? Any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I still maintain my website, sweeteningthepill.com, and everything is linked out from there. My book, a couple of courses I did and put online. Otherwise, it's pretty much available most places. But since like 2019, 2020, it's dropped out of a lot of independent bookstores. Like they just didn't keep fulfilling. So really Amazon is the best place to go. I know people really don't like Amazon, but if you're an independent publisher that or writer with a book that isn't like a huge book, then that is the place to get books still. I'm afraid they still make that happen, and a lot of other places don't, like bookshop.org and those kind of places. So
it's true, unless you have like a cool little bookshop that orders, right? Like I've in different places I've lived, there's been, you know, a cool little bookshop that I just wanted to support, and they would order the books in for me.
So you can totally do that. Please do that too, because then they might stock them. But yeah, most independent bookstores don't off their own back.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah. If there's anybody here that owns an independent bookstore, like
I had a conversation with somebody who owns an independent bookstore, because I said they wanted to put a bookshop.org website link on the documentary website, and I said, my book isn't going to be listed there. They're going to list it as out of stock or whatever. And she was like, well, what should we do? I said, you need to put an Amazon link on there. And she was like, no, I'm absolutely not going to do that. And I said, okay, but Amazon is the only place you can buy my book. Because of independent bookstores not stocking it, I can't change that. I can't make a difference there. You know, that you need to be calling it in, or people need to be going in and asking for it. There's also a lot of libraries, to be honest. It isn't a lot of library systems too, which is really good. I'm a big fan of that, obviously. I think that's great. But yeah, so that's, yeah, and then with Teena, it's myteena.com. And then on social media, we're at We Are Teena, Teena, as you said, to find that there. But yeah, that's about it. And then the movie is available to rent from the businessofbirthcontrol.com. You can rent the 90-minute version, which is the full feature version. I think you could also buy the 90-minute version. So if you wanted to show it to friends or whatever. And then we also have the hour-long version, which we premiered in Richmond, Virginia in late 2023, which is like called like the TV cut, but it's basically like the educational cut. So it's a condensed version, but it kind of is. If you haven't seen it and you've seen the feature, it's worth watching because it brings out things in a more intensive way just through the editing process. It's kind of a different animal, and it's kind of interesting. I found it very interesting to watch. And there's other people highlighted and different things highlighted in it that aren't in the feature. And that is available to rent on businessofbirthcontrol.com. But you can also rent the feature on 90-minute version on Amazon Prime Video if you have that. So talking about Amazon, that's also a place where independent movie makers can put their movies, and then they get bought there when Netflix won't take you or anywhere else for that matter. We went to them all. They didn't want it. So.
Yet. The culture is changing, and at some point they'll all be knocking on your door. So it's just a matter of time, right? Sheer stubborn persistence.
Yes, we will see. Maybe I need to start emailing.
Why not?
Time. It might be time. The culture is changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with like social media, with more people talking about it on social media, there's definitely every year I feel like there's more and more conversation. So it's becoming something that I would think that the Netflix of the world would want to put on their site.
Yeah, it would be really nice. I mean, they have all kinds on there, don't they? They have like a documentary they put on there about Xanax, so I don't see how this is any different. They do exposés of the beauty industry these days about, estrogenic products, which is interesting. But yeah, no, that's been a long slog. So if you have been waiting to watch it, do go and watch it because it is getting out there. We do free windows still periodically, but we won't be doing them as much from now on because there's not the team for it, and it's quite labor intensive for everybody. So yeah, just you can rent the feature or the slightly less lower price point, the hour-long version, which is well worth watching too, I would say, even if you've seen the feature.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like Nicole and I were at the Richmond Film Festival for it, and we were like, oh, that's really doing something different. There's like different points brought out in it. So yeah.
Love that. So at the end of our interviews, we have a really fun rapid answer question thing where we can learn a little bit more about you. So
okay. Oh, this is where I always give the answers that I
not to put you
sleep over later on, and I'm like, why did I tell them my favorite movies? So this is always fun for me. Okay. There's one I did like literally 8 years ago, and I still occasionally wake up in the night and go, wow, when are people going to realize you told her your favorite movies? Anyway, carry on.
Kick it off, Katie.
All right. What is your biggest craving?
Crisps or chips, as you call them in America. I think I call them chips too now, to be honest. I don't know why I went with crisps. Just salty, like potato-y snacks are like my nemesis still. I can get through those if I really want to. And I remember when I lived in London, I used to sometimes just eat a packet of crisps instead of have dinner, and it was very satisfying.
What do you eat to satisfy those cravings? Do you just go for the chips, or do you try and do a little something alternative from time to time?
I find like if I'm really in like a carb world, like I really want big carbs, but I don't want to have like a big bowl of pasta or a big bag of chips or whatever. Then like anything like squashy, like butternut squash or delicata squash or spaghetti squash or anything like that, especially this time of year, I've been really enjoying that, like making nice like tomatoey sauces with things like that, or like stuffing them, or like or anything like that. I really like. I find I feel really like very, very like happily full after eating meals that I've made like that.
I agree. What is your favorite way to move your body?
I like to walk. We walk a lot. We're in the area with like a lot of hills, and like you can do a lot of hill walking, a lot of stair walking, all the secret staircases. And yeah, so I really like to do that the most, especially as it's like usually beautiful weather, and most of the year perfect temperature. There's really no excuse, and I don't drive, so we do a lot of neighborhood walking to like the movie theater or the grocery store, or like it's just built in to the way that we live. So yeah, that's probably what I do the most.
What is your number one self-care go-to when you're stressed out?
I've been really into edibles recently. But I can't do much because I'm real lightweight. So, like, literally, I'm talking like 2 milligrams at the most. But I've got really into doing that like before I go to bed, and then just doing some ASMR, which I've only got into in the last like year. I remember thinking ASMR was like the weirdest thing, like, really couldn't imagine. And I still, for the most part, find a lot of ASMR very strange. But there's very specific, like maybe 2 or 3 people, who's 2 British people and 1 American person that I really like, that do like really good stuff. And so I like to watch that, and that really zones me out and like really relaxes me. I can do it in the day too without feeling like massively sleepy. But if I do the combination of those two things at night, then I'm good.
What music do you listen to when you're working?
Oh, well, I've just got back to being able to listen to Boy Genius again, because we went to see them play at the Hollywood Bowl on Halloween, and we listened to them a lot before that, and then they were stuck in our heads forever, and so then we were like, no more, and now we're back to it again. So like I've always been into like the folky kind of stuff, so I really like them. My husband kind of introduced them to me, and I really love that band. They're huge now, obviously. And then there's a British singer called Tom Odell that I really like, Odell, who has a new album out on Friday, and he's very depressing, and I really enjoy how depressing his music is. Most of it's like really like, oh boy, you're going through it. And I've seen him live quite a lot, so I listen to a lot of stuff like that. I'm one of those people that is not great with like discovering new music. I'll listen to the same thing, the same stuff that I have for years over and over again. And then if I do find somebody, I just listen to that, and that's it. I don't like I'm not the kind of person that looks at like a music festival lineup and knows everybody and is like, oh, I'm really good. I'll know like 2 of the bands and be like, oh, I really like them. But like, I'm sure there's a whole world of stuff I would love. I also occasionally like to listen to the hits channel on Amazon Music and be like, oh, I didn't know that was that person who did that song that I've heard in Ubers. And that's the only way I know what's going on in pop music. So, yeah.
Same. Favorite country, city, place that you've visited?
Oh, that's a tough one that I've visited. In America, I really liked Atlanta. I found that city really like fascinating and beautiful and interesting, and I would like I always think if I didn't live here, I would live there if I was going to live in another city. And where else? Norway. I had a lovely vacation in Norway many years ago and took the train from Bergen to Oslo, which was beautiful. I think of that often. You can get off halfway and take this like crazy little train that goes down the mountain to a place called Flam. It's like got a fjord. It's a fjord, and you can like beautiful clear water of this little Norwegian village. No, I like a lot of places. Most places I visit, I'm like, oh, I could live here. What are the house prices? Like, I'm quite easy to please. I've been to a lot of places I like. I don't know if I've ever been to anywhere I don't. I'm like, I'm never going back there again. That would be interesting. I think Paris, in some sense, I love Paris, but in some senses, I was like, it's not what you think. But yeah.
What is your favorite holiday?
So being English, I've had to embrace a lot more holidays here than you do in England. Like Halloween when I left England was not a big deal. It's more so in the UK now. And then like Thanksgiving is like practice Christmas to me, but here it feels like it's more important than Christmas, which is strange. But it's also when you do like what's closer to our Christmas dinner than you do on Christmas Day, which is quite different. And then you don't do Easter here at all, which I really miss from the UK because you get 4 days off, standard long weekend. No, they don't. People don't even acknowledge Easter exists here, except for chocolate, I suppose. But like that's not really a holiday just on its own. Well, I suppose you do that a lot. Now I'm thinking about it. So my favourite, I don't know. I don't know. Christmas, I guess. Because it's like acknowledged by everybody and you get that week between Christmas and New Year that is so enjoyable, and it's like even in the US legitimately considered for most people time off unless you work in retail. If you're a laptop person, most of us consider it kind of time off, which in this country is a rarity, right? Like actually acceptable time off. Like even when like the day after Thanksgiving might not be acceptable time off. So anything that gives like stops the emails coming, it's great. So that's not Halloween, and it doesn't seem to be Thanksgiving anymore, but it does seem to be Christmas. So.
Love it. Is there any particular food that you hate?
Yes, blueberries. Can't eat blueberries. Oh. And it's totally psychosomatic. I watched Stand By Me when I was a child, and there's a scene in it where the boy eats lots of blueberry pie and then vomits up the blueberry pie, and literally I can feel it right now. The feeling I get like when I was 8 years old from that movie. And it's not I'm not a terribly picky person. I say that, but then like I'm not eating like a clam. I'm not eating any of those critters that come out. No, I'm not doing that, any of that really. But blueberries is a specific thing that is really strange for me in terms of like it being a fruit that no other fruits bother me. But I have a major psychosomatic issue with blueberries. Which means no blueberry pancakes, no blueberry muffin. No, like America's big on blueberries. The UK not so much.
Oh, interesting.
You can get away with not seeing a blueberry there.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I grew up in New Hampshire. Maine is big for blueberries. There's a huge blueberry festival here in North Carolina.
No, wouldn't hope that.
Don't come visit them.
I bet they do pie eating contests there. In fact, that's where. Hang on, Stephen King is from Maine. That's probably where Stand By Me was set. So he probably based it from the Blueberry Festival. Oh, it's terrible, terrible times. But there you go. We've connected it now. Now I have to. Now I'm thinking about it too much. I have to move on.
Okay, pumpkin spice, yay or nay?
Yes. I always go and get a pumpkin spice something from somewhere. You can't not. So I suppose that's the holiday I do honour, the holiday of pumpkin spice.
We made pumpkin
I
spice.
do. I do all the festive things. I do. I like all like the run up to Christmas festive novelty things. Really, I'm kind of quite big into that. I really like the candy cane tea they get at Trader Joe's.
Mm.
All that sort of thing. I enjoy.
Same. We made pumpkin spice waffles for breakfast today, and they were
Oh wow!
delish.
There you go.
Do you cook?
Yes, I do. I never used to really. I used to find it very like I don't really like. It's weird. I can't even remember what I must have done because I didn't really like it, and it was difficult for me. I just didn't get my head around it. But in like 2020, at home a lot more, I got really into like Alison Roman YouTube channel, and like basically taught myself to cook from there, and got like more and more confident. And so yeah, I cook a lot. And I just went back, went with my husband's family and was cooking for them pretty much every day. And I get into different people. I got into Alison Roman, then I got really into Jamie Oliver, Ottolenghi. I got really into. I just do like all of the recipes in the book, and like yes, I'm very into cooking. I like to cook now. I feel weird if I don't cook at the end of the day, especially. So I obviously enjoy it at this point. Sometimes I get to the point where I'm like, especially when it gets really hot here and you can't really turn the oven on, I get to the point where I can't deal anymore and don't know what to do. But when it's winter, it's more fun because you can do more baking and things. But yeah, I am very into it. I like cooking, and it always surprises me how many people don't cook. And you discover them over time, and you're like, how are you surviving in life? What are you doing? Oh, you're just literally living on green smoothies and takeout. Okay.
Where's your favorite place to work?
Probably on when I'm on away traveling on my phone, because I love that I have a job that allows me to do that, and that's really nice. And a lot of people don't because they have to go to an office every day. So anywhere that isn't office is great, because that to me is just the joy that I don't have to do that. And especially if I can be doing like significant work elsewhere and like in my own time and flexibly, I think I still find that really cool, because for a lot of people that's not their reality. They have to battle to an office every day, and I have done that in the past and it wasn't fun.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I wrote my first fiction book when I was living in Israel and Greece because it was not home. I was just out traveling and it just poured out. And then the first nonfiction book, The Revolution Will Be Bloody, I wrote in Bali on my laptop, sitting outside at cafes for the most part. This last book I wrote in my office, but this is the first time I've ever had a home office, so it was a little novel, I think.
Right.
Ooh, home office, this is fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wrote my book in like a cafe in Oregon and in the library, not at home really. So yeah, on a tiny, tiny little ASIC laptop that I don't think even exists anymore, but I still have.
I love it. All right, last question. What's your ideal Friday night?
Reality TV. Not going out.
Bag of crisps.
I might be at that point in my life where my best night is not going out. It was kind of a shock. Otherwise it'd be seeing like a really good movie at a movie theatre and having dinner or something. But yeah, if I'm at home watching like really good reality TV, might be some crisps involved, cooking, something I really like to cook, like, I don't know, like a spaghetti squash or something, and ASMR and edible and going to sleep.
Cozy and relaxing. I quite like it. It's like kind of the perfect unwind from the week.
I like reading a lot too, though, so there might be some reading in there. I read a lot of novels, so that's probably part of it too. That's my weekend thing.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my God. Thank you so much for going on this journey with us today. I should warn the listeners that Katie and I down the road have plans for some birth control specific episodes, and we will be inviting Holly. Hopefully she'll say yes back. Hopefully I'm putting enough pressure on her by announcing this right now.
Yes, you're
So
like,
hopefully we'll have Holly back.
You can't let us down.
That's right. But yeah, we'll definitely have to dive into the hormonal birth controls and all of those things. And we would love to have you come in and lend your expertise to that when we get down to that bit. We've got some other things to cover first.
Yes, well, the lots, I'm sure. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to seeing it pop up on my Apple Podcasts app.
We'll be there. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us and letting us peek into your life and what it's like to do all of the amazing things you've done. And honestly, my biggest thanks are thank you for just being so inspiring and persistent.
Definitely.
I'll keep trying to be those things.
Nailed it.
I don't think you could be anything else.
Oh, that's very kind. I assure you I can.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. Of course, as always, like, subscribe, let us know what you think, and we will see you all in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.
A big shout out and thank you to our sponsors for today's episode, Period Coaching School and Katie Bressack Wellness.
Thanks to you, our favorite bestie, for listening to the Period Besties podcast, where no topic is TMI. And of course, share this episode with your besties.
Remember to leave us a 5-star review, nothing less than the best for us besties, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can follow us on Instagram at Stasha Washburn and at Katie Bressack, or email us at periodbestiespodcast@gmail.com.
Check out more about us at katiebressack.com and periodcoachingschool.com. And of course, check the show notes for free goodies and extras that support this episode.
We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye for now, besties.